All right, so today's video, we're back with more TikTok reacts. TikTok reacts are always fun. Just make sure to like a video, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. All that helps with the algorithm. And yeah, let's get right into it. All right, so first of all, we have Violet Canor. Sorry if I butchered the name here. They have a video that says, hope this helps. All right, I don't know what to expect, but we're going to find out. Here we go. It's time.
If you're ever wondering what tank you should swap to in order to best counter the other tank, I got you covered. After you lose a single fight, what you want to do is assess the enemy team comp. Are they on Ryan? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Hog? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Orisa? Swap to Mauga. Are they on D.Va? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Zarya? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Doom? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Sigma? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Jinkipi? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Hammond? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Aaron? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Winston? Swap to Mauga. Are they on Mauga? Swap to Mauga.
I love that. And I will say, by the way, I agree with everything here except for the D.Va one. I think D.Va's good against Mauga now. I just had to put that out there, but I love that. Just swap to Mauga. Swap to Mauga. Swap to Mauga. By the way, little side note before we get into more, like, you know, we go into more of these, like, these TikToks here. I do want to point out, I really did like the passives because when I played in the passive, like, quick play hacked, it very much felt like there was a little bit less of the counter swap issue because you could just counter passive. Does that make sense? It took away some of that, like, that like pain point of counter swapping, because you could just be like, oh, they're going a bunch of CC and all this, so like, or a bunch of, like, you know, they're gonna nade me, hack me, etc. Well, guess what? You go 40% reduction on all that stuff. I recognize that it was kind of cool. I don't know if that would alleviate some of the issues with, like, you know, Mauga has in some ranks. And I do want to point out, little side note, Mauga is a lot worse now, but I love the meme behind this because this is exactly how Overwatch was for a long time. And I hear Mauga is still doing really well in metal ranks. All right, next we have Yo Noah. We've had a few of Yo Noah stuff before. It says the tank buffs did not address crucial problems with the tank role.
People think Mauga's really strong right now, and I think most of that is just a visceral reaction to seeing him getting any sort of buffs, because the history of that character is absolutely obnoxious with how good he has been at certain points. But I do not see nearly enough people talking about how absolutely absurd of a character D.Va is right now. 3.5 seconds straight of nuh-uh, you can't touch this.
First of all, D.Va's not that. No, D.Va is extremely strong right now. As you know, I have a lot of D.Va hours. D.Va's really strong. And I think, like, what I would like for them to do, and we'll go on the rest of the video here, I really would like to see D.Va end up in a spot where you kind of keep some of the ability to brawl, but you pull back the defense matrix again. It's just the break point. We've discovered the break point of D.Va, where the frustration level for players playing against D.Va is about, what is it, 3.5 seconds right now on defense matrix. That's the break point. It's very equal to or equivalent to Zarya having the 2.5 second bubble. It just, people aren't going to enjoy playing against that. The other stuff is fine. The damage output, I think, could be fine, but the DM probably needs to get reverted back. And this is coming from a D.Va player. Well, who plays a lot of D.Va.
That is absurd, but I'm so happy that they did this to D.Va because it is just a perfect example of why buffing tanks in the manner that they did does not solve the issue with tanks. As anybody who has ever played D.Va can tell you, the second you win a fight as D.Va, the enemy tank is swapping to Zarya. Because it doesn't matter if D.Va had unlimited amounts of matrix, Zarya's beam cuts straight through all of it. And that is where the flaws are in the tank buffs. All they did was make tanks better at what they are already good at. D.Va is even better at eating projectiles, Mauga is even better at shredding big body tanks like Hog, but nothing was done to address their weaknesses or how strong their counters are into them. If anything, making their strengths even stronger only succeeds in making it even more attractive to swap to characters that can exploit their weaknesses. It's only a matter of time until people realize this, they realize that this update did not fix tanks, and they're looking forward to the next one, which will inevitably not fix it, and the buff, nerf, rework cycle continues.
Okay, just a little side note on that one, and I think this is my take a little bit on tanks too, is I feel like and this could be a hot take, this could be a correct take, this could be a wrong take, but I think that the armor changes alone, as well as the reduction to the support passive or the DPS passive, would have been enough to begin with. And I say that because a lot of, like, tanking, and I kind of came up with this analogy yesterday, or not analogy, but, like, a lot of tanking is getting to your spots, right? The problems that tanks ran into in, like, Season 9 and Season 10 was the equivalent of, like, you're playing, like, you know, basketball, and, like, the only spot you can get to is a half-court shot, right? That's what happened with tanks, is that you could never get to where you needed to get to be able to get any of the value you wanted to get, right? And that's kind of what happened in Season 9 and 10. So then what happened is they gave tanks the opportunity to get to their spots now, but now they have the wide-open threes, as well as just, like, the armor change and the passive being 10% on tanks. Truthfully, I think that would have been fine, right? The problem is, I think that wouldn't have been as like good of a patch for people in general when it comes to like, if you're a tank player and tanks are struggling, right? And tanks were in a spot where it wasn't that tanks were bad, it's that tanks weren't as fun to play. A tank player will more than likely want to go check things out if they do a bunch of buffs to tanks overall, rather than, oh, we changed these 2 things about tanks, because they've done a lot of those changes over the time and it hasn't really shifted the tanks in general. So my hope is that eventually they discover that like the armor change and the passive change they made to like tank or against tank was good, and that alone could give tanks a really good spot. Now it's just really like fine-tuning those down. So like, let me give an example. Maybe give D.Va the damage, but reduce the defense matrix back. See how that is. And it's still a lot of time. This is a very, very early mid-season they had. Second of all, D.Va versus Zarya, I still don't mind D.Va versus Zarya. If it's a King's Row, right? Say I'm playing a King's Row, I get that. You know, you're not going to be able to do the matchup of D.Va versus Zarya a lot, right? You know, a map like Dorado, you go Zarya against me just because I'm on D.Va, thank you. Because you're going to make that game 10 times easier on me at that point. And I think that's going to be a much better spot in general, at least in my opinion. All right, next we have Coach OC. Well, this would be a good one. It says 5v5 versus 6v6. Which format is better? She always does really, really good videos, so I'm excited to see where this goes.
5v5 or 6v6? That's the question tearing the Overwatch community apart. The devs will be releasing an official blog post on the issue.
Could be this week.
This is a debate that has been around since Overwatch 2's release, with plenty of players defending both versions of the game. I've gotten the question many times before. As a coach with professional experience, what do I prefer, 5v5 or 6v6? The answer is, I don't really care. I enjoyed playing the game during 6v6, and I enjoyed playing the game during 5v5.
See, and this is actually what I've kind of been saying with like my take on it, is I'm kind of in the same boat. I've enjoyed playing both. There's going to be strengths and weaknesses to both, and like I think on both sides of the coin there's like good arguments that are happening there. My biggest issue has been like it's become a lot less of like why 5v5 is good or why 6v6 is good, and it's become more of you're wrong, I'm right. I definitely liked the discussion a lot more when it was like in between, where like you could talk about the pros and cons of both and understand like why some are good and why some are bad, and then it just became like, no, you're wrong.
The only major format change I will really defend adamantly is the implementation of role queue. Without role queue, it is essentially impossible to balance the game.
Yes.
Overwatch without role queue is infinitely worse than 5v5 or 6v6. Most advocating for the removal of role queue are casual players anyways who have never experienced the nightmare of goats. Trust me, never again. What I will say about the issue of 5v5 versus 6
Just to talk about role queue very quickly, role queue was an important part for Overwatch. For anybody who played prior to role queue, and maybe you even play open queue right now too and you do enjoy it, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it sucks, you shouldn't enjoy it, right? I think in game, and especially like, you know, enjoy what you have fun with, etc., and then that's fine. But the problem is that it was really, really, really hard to be able to balance the game, as that was just said, in Overwatch, when you basically have, it's on the players to kind of dictate how the map will go. And what I mean by that is like, if you need a tank on Junkertown, but you have 5 DPS and a support, and nobody wants to switch off, that was your experience more than it was, okay, we have 2 tanks, 2 DPS, 2 support. That's what like open queue was. And no one did that, right? No one wanted to do that. No one wanted to ever go those roles. And that's how a lot of players fell into becoming more support players than tank players. And I think support was always being played a lot more, obviously. But tank players are like, okay, we need a tank. I mean, a lot of players in rank became tank players that way out of necessity because nobody would play tank. And then role queue was created because like they needed to force some structure to the game, and they had to make a decision, and this was like years ago, of do we want an unstructured game that basically will be very frustrating, that players will constantly swap, like not go what would be an ideal or at least something that makes sense, or we force a role queue, which is what they did, but then they ran into some other issues. What point being is that role queue generally helped alleviate some of like major issues they had, which is why they went there. And I will say that my experience from open queue and role queue has been much better.
Both versions of the game play differently and have different drawbacks. I'll talk about the differences in an objective way without considering if they are good or bad, and you can make your own judgment. In 6v6, CC was rampant and you needed to watch your moves carefully.
Yep.
Not even considering CC, tanks would explode much faster, and chaotic ult fights were even more chaotic. With 12 players on the board and tank passive not in play, building your ult was also significantly easier. This made 6v6 a much more macro-heavy game centered around ult usage and execution. Having an extra tank also allowed one of the tanks to focus on taking angles, providing more positional freedom for both teams. In 5v5, there's much less CC, and tanks are—
We'll just pause there because I want to go through like each point. CC was huge, right? Now, I also think that like the problem that you're going to run into a lot of the time is that a lot of players in this discussion have played in different ranks. So like an experience in gold may not have been as much of like that macro style play because like you're in gold and like there's a lot less, like you're not going to have as much reliance on those type of plays. So the experience in that rank could have been a lot different because you're not dealing with some of those things. But like in top 500, for example, oh yeah, I mean, you think getting one shot as a tank now is something like I would get one shot on cooldown. And that was if you got the correct comp. A lot of the times it wasn't as simple as, oh, I load in and we play Ryan Zarya, let's have a good time. It was, okay, I loaded in, I'm playing solo. I load in, and they are, okay, our tank immediately locked Roadhog. Oh no, our other tank locked Zarya, and they get mad at you if you go Rhine, so you have to play a double off tank comp now. And a lot of that was like, that was some of the experience of it. And it felt good when you got the perfect comps, but getting those comps and then being a top 500 player, you couldn't really play any comps outside of like double shield. And if you played double shield, then you would beat the other team who was struggling to get this double shield comp because they would be on Hog Zarya. And that's really a lot of what would happen in a lot of my rank games. And this is, keep in mind, I would approach like 1,500 to 2,000 rank games a season. This was when the seasons were a little bit longer. And that's what it was like. I would say more of my games were not getting the correct team comp than it was getting the correct team comp. It was a frustrating experience at times. At the same time, to the side of what's being talked about, it does help alleviate some of the pressure on the other tank, which is what you saw. But getting the right team comps is really difficult, like really difficult.
Are individually much stronger. This was a necessary adjustment to allow a single tank to fulfill the role of two. In 6v6, you would usually have one tank playing around the core, while the other focused on taking angles or marking flankers. In 5v5, your tank is typically forced to play more around the core all of the time. Even Ball has to play more centrally around the team, rather than Overwatch 1's flanky style centered around quick, effective hits and subsequent disengages. Some tanks adjusted well, and other tanks did not. Because compositions are typically built around the tank, and your solo tank is so important, the counter-swap game has also become more prominent in 5v5. This is not something you can fix with balancing or any sort of patch, this is just the fundamental way that 5v5 Overwatch functions. In 5v5, neutral fights are also much more important, and the game is a bit more mechanics focused, and fights tend to be faster paced and there's less ultimates in the mix. I feel like this debate boils down to how you feel about—
So, just to pause there very quickly about 5v5 also, not 5v5, but like that take, I want to segue back again to passives. I actually think that there's a way that you won't get rid of the counter swap problem, but I actually do believe that after playing in the passives and seeing that like I can make a decision to just like switch my passive and spawn rather than to switch my hero was a pretty cool idea. Now, whether or not that could be done correctly or if it doesn't become like meta passives, etc., is a different story. But having the option to like just swap my passive rather than being forced off my hero, it felt good to be able to do that. An example was I was on Doomfist, and just like every quick play game I play, the moment they see any tank, they go Sombra. I said, okay, I'm on Doomfist. I'm going to switch to the 40% reduction, the 40% debuff, right? Now Sombra's losing value. The Ana they swapped to is losing value. The Roadhog they had swapped to is that all these heroes are losing value because I can play the game a little bit more now, which was cool. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but I did see a little bit of like, okay, I like the idea of this. I want to see where it goes, right? Although I would prefer it to be like hero individual passives rather than like that, but it was a cool option. Yeah, you're essentially counter-swapping your passives, but you could say the argument there could be the gameplay loop of swapping your passives over having to swap a hero, I think is better for the game if you're in a mindset of, oh, I need to swap my passive. It doesn't feel as bad to swap a passive than it is to swap a hero, especially if you may only have a hero pool of like 2 hero pools, right? You may only have like, you only can play 2 heroes, and like if both your heroes are getting counter swapped, maybe that's where like the passives come into play, where you can then go and make like a decision based off of what their team's making. And it doesn't really ruin the game for the other heroes. It just takes away some of the effectiveness of what that counter swap does. Counter swapping will always exist, especially in that case in point of like it's 5v5, like the tank will, you can't change much of that part, but you can shift some of that elsewhere.
An individual's impact on the game, and whether you prefer a more well-rounded team-based game that is more macro-oriented, 6v6, or if you prefer a more individual-oriented game that focuses more on individual performance and neutral fights, 5v5. I've personally enjoyed both versions of Overwatch,
I've enjoyed both
and
too.
My observation is that 5v5 has been a little bit more difficult to balance than 6v6. If two heroes perform the same role, such as Winston and D.Va, what is usually the case is that one of them is better than the other in a 5v5 format. For most Overwatch 2, Winston has been the clear and obvious choice between Winston and D.Va, and this leaves D.Va in the dust. Look at Reinhardt, Ramatra, and Orisa as well. They essentially all do the same thing and act as brawl tanks. Usually one of them is the clear and obvious choice at any point in time. These issues are still present in 6v6, but to a lesser degree. A rotating tank meta might just be an unfortunate cost of the 5v5 format. Tank is genuinely just a difficult role to balance in 5v5. In conclusion, both formats have shown—
Little side note, it's also a difficult role to get everybody to play. And this goes in this isn't just an Overwatch thing, because people will like reference like stats to me about like where tanks are at. This is like an overall just gaming thing. I think like in most games, and if there's a game I'm missing here that has like tank be the dominant role, any game I've ever played that has a tank, it's the least played role. You just getting people to sign up to be a tank is just tough.
Shown potential, but it's difficult to tell which is objectively better, and we can only work off of subjective views. I'll likely be making a full-length YouTube video on the topic after the blog post is released, so make sure to check that out. And we'll also have to have some follow-up videos here as well to talk a bit more about this heated debate.
A little side note there, OC did a great job. There just wasn't a video about like this is better, that's better, and this is what I was talking about, where like I love when the discussion is more just about like the points of like what the strengths and weaknesses are, rather than it is like you're right, I'm wrong. All right, this next one we have is from Eva Mia OW, and it says, Dell knows better than to stay on Hog versus Orisa. Okay, let's see.
Thanks, Orisa. Well, back to spawn I go, guys.
Payload mobilizing.
Okay, I do want to, I have a hot take about that video, though. Okay, I have not a hot take, but like honestly, this is just a good play. Like you would do this even in Overwatch 1. If you get to like 3rd point on like Gibraltar with 5 minutes left and you don't have a snowball going, I would go back to spawn all the time and shift, because like there's just better comps that can run here. So honestly, like if anything, that's a smart play. That's not even like and then they did keep in mind they did go into counter swap mode. I see that going to Zarya against the Orisa. But I still like going back and doing that. I don't know. I see that as the correct play. All right. Next one is from Two-Legged Spider here that just talks about a response to someone else. This is, I guess, a 5v5, 6v6 one.
Back to 6v6, a lot of things gotta change. First off, tanks across the board would need health nerfs and cooldown nerfs. No more 4-second defense matrix. It'd probably have to be less than 2. Zarya would probably need her bubble reverted back to how it works in Overwatch 1. Maoga's cardiac overdrive would not be able to affect his teammates. Because imagine giving a second tank the ability to self-heal with you. Hog's abilities need to be cancelable again, and Ramatra's block needs to do half the reduction it does now. But there's some tanks I think could actually work super well in a 6v6 as they currently are, aside from the universal simple stat changes every tank would need. Junker Queen and Doomfist would both be amazing as off-tank.
Wait, by the way, I don't think Sigma should be shifted at all. And then this is a side note talking about like the balance side. I feel like Sigma was one of those heroes that was always one of the more like beneficial tanks. Plus, like some of the balance suggestions here, I actually think would make the tanks even worse. And maybe I'm just misremembering some of the balance of Overwatch 1, but like I feel like some of the tanks would just be terrible at that point. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just so far off from the Overwatch 1 patches that I don't even remember what like the actual stats were before. But I feel like Sigma was always in a good spot to begin with. Sigma's just a good like tank. Sigma, in my opinion, has been the most consistently good tank in Overwatch 2.
And in my opinion, they feel healthier in 6v6 customs than they do in 5v5, by a long shot. It's not just tanks that would need changes, though. Abilities like Ana's Grenade have been infinitely easier to land with only one tank on the field. And in my opinion, Ana's Grenade would need a buff like a cooldown reduction if another tank was added. Not to mention that with 2 tanks, Nade is not nearly as oppressive as it is with only 1 tank, where it can basically remove your most important player from the game off of cooldown. I want to make it very clear that tanks should not return to the game the same way they were in Overwatch 1. They need to come back with a different philosophy. Reinhardt should have a weak shield. He has a second tank to help him close ground on enemies. He doesn't need a shield that never breaks. Make tanks squishier, give them more impactful abilities, make them be able to do damage, give Sig his one-shot back, but don't make him unkillable. Tanks should not be able to freely 1v1 DPS. I'm not saying they should always lose, but they also shouldn't always win. The game is at its most fun when things actually die.
I mean,
it's a shooter game.
Depends on a few things. One thing I do want to point out here, though, and I don't know if this point's been brought up a ton, and I'm not saying that the customs are like aren't good, but like I feel like sometimes isn't Overwatch just feel better when you get in a custom lobby? Like if you're in like a structured lobby where like players are all taking it seriously and you're not like trying to battle your teammates just to swap a hero in like a rank game. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying that Like, the 6v6 mode isn't good. I haven't played it, but I've heard good things about it. But what I'm saying is, like, it also is going to feel a lot more fun because you're just sitting there with, like, a bunch of people who want to play the same thing and have a good time. So, like, that can also be very helpful there, too. The same reason why I like, when you like scrimming. Exactly. Or you like playing in matches. It's like, it's much more structured, so it's a lot... Structured is going to be, like, a much better experience because you're not battling your teammates. And I only say that because, like, I just went on that whole story about how, like, trying to get your teammates to go the correct comp, and even in Overwatch 1 was so difficult. And in Overwatch 2, you just battle. It's like a battle. It's like the mental game. The first thing you got to do when you get into a ranked game is battle your teammates to try to get on the same page. That's the first battle of ranked of Overwatch. Then you go from there. So when you get rid of that first step, it makes things a little bit better. All right, next we have Noah again. Yo Noah says, D.Va proves that tank in 5v5 will never be balanced, and Counterwatch will never be fixed.
The more I look into this character, the more she proves everything I've thought about this game. Did you know that D.Va has received not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 consecutive buffs, and then I just didn't care to look any further to make sure there weren't more, honestly? If this isn't the definition of power creep, I don't know what is. And by the way, this does not take into consideration the headshot reduction, the armor buffs, any tank passive at all. These are strictly buffs to D.Va's power level as a whole. And the reason I love it so much is because even with all of these consecutive buffs and with how absurdly strong this character is right now, 90% of players do not think D.Va is a problem, and that is because of 5v5. That is because of this format making it so easy that it doesn't...
Yo, I gotta pause for a second. There is 0% chance they're saying 90% of people don't think that D.Va is strong right now. I'm gonna be real with you. No. I can tell you right now, D.Va is absolutely getting a lot of, like, people want D.Va nerfed right now. I'm gonna put percentages there, but I have seen a lot of people want D.Va to be absolutely, like, I think upwards to, like, 69% of people want D.Va to be nerfed. I think D.Va's really good right now, but I'm also a D.Va player, so, like, it's maybe that's just because, like, I play so much D.Va, I see the full value of D.Va. Also, the reason why D.Va got a bunch of buffs there, maybe I can go a little bit more detail on why I think they're doing the buffs. It's really hard to, like, give you a definitive answer on some of this stuff because I just don't know the exact reason they're doing some of the buffs or changes that they do in general. But one thing I do want to point out when it comes to, like, these type of slight changes we've seen, or, like, things in general to D.Va, they're trying to make D.Va not sit there and shoot the tank the whole time. Because what they're realizing is that a lot of players, when they play D.Va, they end up defaulting to playing a Reinhardt-based playstyle. So what they're doing is they're trying to give the tools to the player to stop just sitting there shooting a tank. Because with the armor changes, D.Va's been worse against Winston. In general, any armor-based tank that D.Va would be good against struggles now. So what they did was, with a lot of those changes, was they're trying to get the players to go into the back line to just try to, like, go and make plays that way rather than shoot at the other tank. That's what they're trying to get them to do. Now, whether that works or not, we don't really know, and more than likely it will happen in some cases, in some cases it won't. But that's why all those changes happen at once, is they're like, you're watching them trying to change the fundamentals of how D.Va's played and, like, how you want to play D.Va. That's what all those changes are. If you look at all of them, it's like tightening the spread, more rocket damage, right? You don't need that against a tank. You're going to still do that against a tank regardless. You could argue the rocket, and they actually did explain it in the thing, saying, oh, you can shoot the tanks more with your rockets. That wasn't the case. People are going to go and shoot a Soldier 76 with that, right? So that's what they try to do, is they shift away a D.Va being in, like, the front line and just, like, shooting at, like, another tank. And they're like, even if there's a Zarya, you can go to their back line. That's what they're trying to get you to do, because they're trying to get the players to start to change their play style. Truth is, that won't happen. And that's also why you're seeing some more of the other stuff with D.Va right now. That won't happen. Players will sit there and just sit in the front line the whole time.
Doesn't matter how strong D.Va is, you just swap Zarya, and D.Va is no longer an issue, and she herself needs to go back to spawn and swap. It is genuinely the...
Am I in, like... Is it because I play so much D.Va that, like, I don't mind if they go Zarya, especially if it's, like, a map that, like, if it's a map that's on, like, King's Row, and maybe, like, an Antarctic Peninsula, or, like, maybe, you know, like, a control center on Koth, like, very niche parts of, like, maps where it's, like, more, like, I don't really worry about a Zarya as much anymore. It also depends on your teammates, because a lot of players don't like to focus on positioning. So if, like, there's a Zarya running the down mid, and you don't have your tank anywhere in your line of sight, and the Zarya's just running you over because you're playing right next to the Zarya, like, it's not going to feel good, so you're going to want your teammate to switch off. So there's a lot there, but I don't know. I keep hearing that. I'm just like...
Perfect example of everything that is wrong with tank in 5v5. And what is the solution to that? No tank is allowed to have a single weakness? As lame as that is, yeah, that might just be the answer for 5v5. And if tanks not having a single weakness doesn't sound like a good time to you, well, allow me to introduce you to...
Okay, as I'm here, in mindset-wise, just to, like, talk about it, I still think that there's room for these, like, new passives they did to help alleviate some of that issue. I'm in hot take mode now, and people will disagree. And by the way, it's okay if you do. I'm always gonna be one of those things where, like, if you don't agree with that discussion on the side of things, I'm fine with that. I just kind of put out my thoughts on it, and that's okay. And if you disagree, that's totally fine. I really do feel like there is room for the passives to alleviate some of the issues. Now, I'm not saying it fixes the issue overall, but it alleviates some of the problems. And as I said earlier, maybe there is a world where the counter swap is the passives rather than is the hero. But there's still so much to see, and maybe they don't even do that. I do enjoy the passives a little bit when I play them. Not to say they were perfect either. Keep that in mind. All right, this one we have here is from Kelly Loves Cats. You know what? I love cats too. I respect that. And they say, glad I saved Hanzo.
Heroes never die.
Hey, you know what? That's being a good teammate. I'm glad we got to see the kill cam point of view, because at first you're kind of like, wait a second, all right, that was a good shot by Widow. Then you watch it and you're like, yep, you know what? You really did save your Hanzo. Weren't even remotely shooting at them, just save their Hanzo. I love that. The next one we have here is from Two-Legged Spider. We obviously see quite a few of their videos. They say that this is just kind of talking about the new, actually, you can see the comment here. So, one second. So this is in reference to the new Space Ranger thing that we've seen. EJ says, Blizzard's actually doing something cool with the new character releases. Not as cool as Sombra, but still, they at least put some effort. Now, just to kind of talk about this a little bit for anybody who didn't play Overwatch 1, back in the early days of Overwatch 1, we're talking like probably the first BlizzCon that we saw for Overwatch 1, maybe the second one. Basically, there was a new hero, Sombra. And what they did was they did this like ARG thing where they kind of put like random like clues on the map. It came down to the point where like people were looking for clues that didn't even exist. I remember like watching streams, and it would have thousands and thousands of viewers of people like looking over Dorado, looking through every single doorway to try to find what Sombra was saying. There wasn't anything there, but the excitement behind the hero was awesome, right? So people got really excited and hyped up about this new hero, and it was over a couple month period, right? A lot of the time now it's like, here's the new hero, here you go. There wasn't much excitement. I mean, you can definitely tell they haven't done the same with each hero that they did in the past. And, like, the ARG, while it was frustrating to some people, was a really exciting moment because, like, it felt like every week there was something new, and you didn't really know what to expect. So that's kind of what this is in reference to, is, like, seeing this again. I also love that out of all the maps they put Space Ranger on, it's Dorado. And I wonder if that's also kind of, like, to show love to, like, that Sombra ARG that happened years ago. Because if I remember correctly, Dorado was one of the maps where, like, they started to really input some of the Sombra stuff. So to kind of do the same thing with Space Ranger here is really cool.
A lot of people seemed really shocked that Space Ranger was introduced with a comet that landed in Dorado. But this actually isn't even close to the first time Overwatch has done something like this.
Yep.
Right before Sombra got released, we got sent on an entire ARG just to try to find out who
there
she
it
was.
is.
Here's an old clip I found of Bastion beeping a code that translated into another code that I don't even remember what it means because there were so many codes.
So by the way, this is Dorado, by the way. You see that? Hey?
Sombra was confusing, but Doomfist was pretty in our face. Overwatch started releasing fake news articles to their forums about Talon attacking a facility in Numani. And around the same time, the Doomfist gauntlet that was once inside the payload went missing.
Yep.
For Ball, they created fake message logs from Horizon Lunar Colony, revealing some safety concerns they had with the animals in containment, and revealing that a certain character named Hammond had gone missing along with Winston. Echo was literally locked in a box that appeared on the Route 66 payload, which directly led into the reunion cinematic where we see her for the first time. I gotta say, I'm really excited to see some actual cool teasing being done for Space Ranger right now. I mean, Mauga had his shirt featured in Samoa or whatever, but like, we haven't really had something this cool to talk about in a long time. And I hope Blizzard keeps finding cool, creative ways to tease heroes in the future because it makes the game so much more fun to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, like, this goes again to what we've been saying. Please make a TV show. Just please. I'm telling you right now, there's so much, people love these characters. Just make a TV show. Just do it. Dude, I remember 2 years ago almost now watching the Kiriko cinematic with like 20,000 people. Y'all remember? That was awesome. Remember that? Remember the servers went down, so we all just sat there and watched cinematics? We had like 20,000 people watching cinematics waiting for the servers to come back up. That was great. People love lore. People love that stuff. So, sorry I segued this conversation again, but just please do something like that. I'm telling you, there's so many... People love the idea of lore in Overwatch, and it's been 8 years of them being like, here's a little bit of lore, but like, we're not gonna really give anything else past that. If you want to go for lore, we're gonna write a book about it, but like, we're not gonna really tell you about it, and you're gonna find out it exists 2 years later when you're on Amazon randomly. So yeah, good luck. All right, next one we have here is from Senti saying, Wrecking Ball Interaction Voice Lines Part 3. All right, let's see how this goes.
Hammond, We were friends on Horizon. Where did we go wrong?
Perhaps it was when you stole his rocket design.
Oh no! I found that in the system. It was an accident.
Was it also an accident when you left for Earth without him?
Jack,
Oh, no.
I need you to make me something else. A robot guard dog for me dirt garden. Maybe it can fly. You decide. A suit of armor, right? But one that shouts my name. I need a slot bucket that's bulletproof. And don't you dare ask why. A grenade launcher with one trigger, 3 barrels, paint, glitter, and nails.
Seems reasonable.
He says, fine, but give me a challenge next time.
May I borrow your copy of Thucydides' history sometime?
Unfortunately, that is not possible.
I can wait until you're done with it.
It was shredded for bedding.
Your grapple
Nice.
looks rather thin. How much weight can it bear?
1 mech, 2 hamsters.
Oh, is there seating for another in there?
No, the mammal eats a lot.
I don't know what they're referencing there, but that was an interesting reference. Okay, anyway. This one here is Baptiste, and they say, did you know any of these?
Here are some Overwatch spray references.
Okay.
You may not know about.
I didn't even know that existed. Wait, I know what the reference is. I didn't even know that existed. That's awesome. Oh. Okay, that one makes sense. I've seen that in videos. Oh, I actually didn't realize this. That's Dark Souls? Oh. By the way, little side note here, great movie. Iron Giant, I haven't watched that movie in years, but I remember when I was a kid, I watched that movie like 5 times in like a day. That movie is so good. If you've never seen Iron Giant, what a classic. Oh, that is Star Trek. Wow. Yep, I knew this one. Star Wars. Oh. See, you know what's funny? I didn't realize all these references. This is cool. I knew that one. I knew that one. That's cool, though. I actually never realized that a lot of, like, the spray references were like that. That's really, really awesome. It must be really cool as, like, an Overwatch artist, too, to, like love something a ton and then be able to, like, hey, I want to do an idea or, like, a spray of this. Can I do it? And they're like, yes, go for it. And be able to, like, go there and make, like, your own, like, take on it. Must be, like, a really fun experience for the people working on that, too. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe to all 3 YouTubes if you haven't. Leave a comment. All of that helps. Let me know your thoughts. There's been a lot of, like, really interesting discussions here, so I want to know what you think about that, too. We also, if you want to link some TikToks to react to, my Discord is where to do that, or pretty much anything that you see video-wise out of me. My Discord is the place to go, so it's in the description below. We also record these live on stream. You can see the Twitch chat right below the webcam, so stop by if you haven't. And with that being said, I hope you all have an amazing day/night.